Yes, sir. Mr. Breaker.
Here.
Dr. Cross. Dr. Crawl. Present. Mrs. Lehman. Here. Mr. Neely.
Here.
Mr. Roth.
Present.
And Mr. Red.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the time set aside for audience presentations. The Board of Education will take all presentations under consideration and respond at the latest by the end of the next regular Board of Education meeting. Your comments will be limited to 5 minutes. Participants are expected to conduct themselves with civility and respect and follow the guidelines outlined in the board policy. Dr. Sander.
Dr. Fisher, and Dr. Fisher will be followed by Brian.
Hello again. So I wanted to start up tonight by clearing up a few misconceptions I've heard floating around. The first being that I want to be here or I have extra time to do that. Because I promise you I don't. I don't want to be here and I have a lot more important things to be doing with my time. I get no personal gain out of this except for the satisfaction of knowing I'm the voice for hundreds of people who can't come up here and safely speak for themselves without fear of retaliation. And that's not even students anymore. It's parents and small business owners and teachers and everyone else that's sending me messages. This community has already chased away so many amazing humans, amazing teachers, amazing business owners because of its oppressive bigotry. And we need to recognize the damage that Morton's status quo has done to our community and decide to change. And it has to be a culture change from the inside out. Which brings me to the second misconception, that the people coming to these meetings don't belong to the Morton community. That is a lie that you've been fed by those that are hoping to forward their own agenda. The people coming to speak at these meetings were not paid actors. They're residents of Morton. They have kids and families and friends that have been affected by that prejudiced Morton culture. And as for the part the board should be playing in that culture, it's been almost 3 months now since the Michael Saunders emails were made public. And yet this board has not done a single thing to address the issues it's brought forth. Not a single thing. You didn't even change the email policy. You just suggested people stop using it for personal use as if that was going to help any of the gay or black kids in our district. So I'm once again here to hold you accountable for the things you're not addressing, concerns that have been brought up for 3 months. At the last meeting, you basically all agreed that the current hotline reporting system does not need addressed, even though it consists of asking students to report their own boss to their boss. Would any of you do that? Would any of you email your boss and saying, I think you're a bigot and I think you're hateful and I think you need investigated? Of course you wouldn't. So we're expecting kids to do that? And then it was argued, okay, well, if the reporting system can't be trusted, tell a trusted adult. How on earth are they supposed to find an adult that's trustworthy? The culture of this district makes it impossible for the teachers who are advocates to be public about their advocacy. And I am not assuming that because of my position on this subject, the teachers are telling me that. They want to be an advocate, they want to be publicly available for these students, but they can't because of fear of retaliation or getting fired. So what possible reasoning could this board have for not investigating a better anonymized reporting system to protect its students? What possible negative outcomes do you see in having a recording of all the instances of bullying and bigotry in our school? Oh, but that's the problem, isn't it? Because if we have a recording of it, then we might actually have to address it. So instead, we're just burying our heads in the sand and pretending like it's not happening. So second, why haven't we hired an outside counsel to evaluate how the district can be more inclusive? Probably the same reason as number one. If we have it on record, we actually would have to address it. So last, why aren't we hiring a more diverse staff and providing current staff with the training that has been proven to decrease suicidality in LGBTQ plus teenagers? 38% of LGBTQ students will have attempted suicide in the past year. 38%. Most of them cite the unsupportive school and home environments they have to live in as the main driving factor. If any of your children had a 38% chance of trying to commit suicide in the next year, would you do nothing? Those are at home. Would you sit by knowing your children could be that statistic? So why aren't we helping the children that are that statistic? I'm really struggling to understand why we can't seem to align our goals on this one. So please explain to me what it's gonna take to convince you that kids not wanting to kill themselves is a cause worth fighting for. Because so far science, statistics, medical experts, testimonials from students in your own district don't seem to make you want to address it. Is it gonna take a dead kid? Is that what's finally gonna make us stand up and take action? Because let's be real, there's only two sides to this argument. My side says, hey, the current way of doing things makes gay, trans, and black kids suicidal and we should probably change it. And the other side seems to say, nah, we don't care. Speaking of doing something about it, to make sure no one forgets next election just how little you did to address these public concerns, if you go ahead and search Ashley Fisher for Morton School Board, you'll find copies not only of my speeches, those recommendations, but also all of your email replies. I'll also be reporting the video recording from last meeting, or one of you two, where we're mocking speakers within range of a camera microphone.
30 seconds.
And for those at home who want to show their support and want this district to change and be an inviting, safe home to all children, no matter their color, sexuality, or gender, there will be petitions posted that you can anonymously sign to show the school board they are currently not representing all their constituents. Because if you insist on continuing to put your heads in the sand while innocent children are suffering, you can be darn sure this community is not going to tolerate that, and I will not tolerate that. History is giving you an opportunity here to do the right thing. The question is, are you going to take it?
Okay, Brian is up and followed by Michelle.
My name is Brian Groth. I'm here tonight as a proxy for Jamie DeShaney Sheridan, a parent in the district. Good evening. My name is Jamie DeShaney Sheridan. I'm a parent with children in the school district, some that have graduated, some that are currently enrolled. I have attended, meaning Jamie, has attended Morton schools from kindergarten through senior year. I own and pay taxes on 2 properties in Morton for the past 26 years. I work with children and families, the last 10 being in foster care administration. I'm a trauma-informed trainer for all levels, from line staff up to administration. I write policies, procedures, trainings to implement the best practices for those vulnerable populations, including LGBTQ+ youth. I've worked with FBI and local law enforcement on human trafficking cases, but most of all, I'm a mom, and I believe that makes me well qualified to speak to you. A highly unethical state law and federal civil rights violation occurred last month to a child and stopped me in my tracks, so tonight I would like to address the bullying happening in Morton 709. If you want to deal with the bullying problem in Morton, as someone who works in social services, I suggest a top-down approach. I've testified in courts close to 100 times, so I don't speak on something unless I can back it up with, as the kids say, the receipts. So let's evaluate the situation. The problem is you. Social contracts say that children rely on adults to protect them and teach them, and I'm going to give you some real-life examples of how you've all failed. You failed to stop bullying, you failed to protect those who are bullied, you failed to punish those who are bullied, and you have shown your true colors as bullies. What kind of leadership in the school district can we expect to deal with such a significant issue when you yourselves take part in it daily? I'm concerned about retaliation against my child who's set to graduate, and I don't want anything to jeopardize that, but I also know that if I don't document it, it didn't happen. So let this be my documentation. I'll not be using names, however, for credibility, let me relay a few first-hand examples from my own children. My child's 4th grade teacher admitted that she would give him marks on his card for infractions that she allowed others to get away with, and would stand outside the door and watch for him to talk regardless of other students' behaviors, because his intelligence challenged her, quote unquote. Despite a formal complaint to the principal and her admission in a meeting, nothing was done to correct the situation. My child didn't attend, excuse me, let me skip ahead here because I know we're going to be on a time constraint. In November 2020, my daughter was exposed to COVID and we made the decision to quarantine her at home in California. And when she started showing symptoms due to the state's higher COVID restrictions, we followed the guidelines and submitted the report to the school so that she could take part in a healthy quarantine and continue classes online. My daughter emailed all of her 10 teachers with no response for 4 days in a row to get the Google Meet codes to her classes. On the 5th day, she received an email from one teacher that read, "We were told by a certain administrator not to give you the codes." When I reached out to that administrator, he replied that he was given the directive by the principal. Upon contacting the principal, I was told that too many parents are taking their kids to Disney and calling it a healthy quarantine, so we're gonna let her have the code since your house is close to Anaheim. Principal went on to tell me options I had expressed in frustration about the situation on my own personal Facebook page and said, "If you're so concerned, we can just put her in an alternative school without your permission." The principal cannot tell me of any students who were denied access to their classes while in attendance, even those at Disney, quote unquote. Ultimately, educational law prevailed and my daughter was allowed into Google Meets. Because bullies tear down others to build themselves up. Regarding the incident I mentioned earlier, I'm protecting the child's identity, but can speak on my advocacy on behalf of this child. Because of issues related to physical health, this child was behind 1.5 credits needed for graduation. An agreement was made in July by this child's parents and principal that would evaluate the need for APEX classes after the first quarter, provided the child met 4 stipulations set by the principal. The child met and exceeded the stipulations, and the parent checked back in after the first quarter to arrange the classes. The principal replied with a 12-word sentence: "Once past due fees are paid, then we can talk about APEX." In May 2022, the state passed a law stating past due fees could not be used as a means to withhold education.
Thank you, Brian. Michelle? And Michelle will be followed by Tammy.
The principal was in direct violation of the state law in one email. The principal did not at any point reference the previous 4 bullet points, but instead the principal resorted to bribery. When a complaint was made that the school was violating the child's right to a free and appropriate public education, Dr. Smock replied that the principal had the authority to decide on APEX classes and initially ignored the fact that the principal had demanded pay for even having a conversation. This constituted a violation of federal civil rights with no remorse. It wasn't until I pointed out state legislation that Dr. Smock admitted the district had no policy regarding the state law, but that they would now follow it, and until a U.S. Department of Education investigation was mentioned that the child's educational rights were acknowledged. Let's talk about how bullies allow bullying. My stepson, who is biracial, was told by another student that he wanted to F your dead mom, just 1 month after my child's biological mother passed away unexpectedly. The offender was questioned and denied it. My son was not questioned any further than his original report. I found out who the boy was, reached out to his parents, who in turn called the school and made their son admit what he had done. Because my son gave me specifics the boy couldn't deny, the boy went to the school and admitted everything, including using racial slurs. The school couldn't be bothered to protect my son, so I had to do the work for them, because boys protect other boys. My daughter had been questioned about the incident and was left feeling the way many victims feel, as though she wasn't believed. When I finally reached out to the principal, I was told that my report was detailed enough that they didn't need to talk to my daughter, and the issue was resolved. Why did it take me calling them over a month later to find this out? In addition, I was told by a former school employee that the offender is a repeat offender and has never received consequences for his actions, because bullies protect other bullies. Now I'd like to share a few firsthand examples from FOIA requests. District staff, some who are still employed and others who are not. A FOIA request was submitted for end-of-year reviews with teachers at the high school. One statement was repeated consistently, being that policies are not upheld consistently. I think several of my examples support this. Another FOIA request revealed emails between Dr. Smock, Dr. Sander, and Mr. Saunders, where they mock of the citizen in emails entitled "The Pot Calling the Kettle Black," saying these things like, "This is rich and how ironic." Is this the kind of people we consider professionals, or we consider bullies? In the last school board meeting, someone associated with the school district administration uttered theatrics on a live mic regarding speakers who speak out about injustices in the school district. If this is how you behave in a recorded school board meeting, how can we expect equal and fair treatment? Bullies use their position to abuse power. Another FOIA request revealed that Dr. Kroll and her co-leader asked Mr. Saunders to use district resources, taxpayer-funded resources, to print out moms and prayer flyers to put on their table and send home in backpacks. Mr. Saunders gladly replied he would. Using position on school board to support the use of school spaces and taxpayer funds to promote religious organization activities, which I would point out the religious organization has rules against. What happens when the top of the chain is the biggest offender of all? Bullies at the top create bullies and support bullies. I'd like to talk about how bullying and abuse of power in staffing situations. Former staff report that their marital status was held over their heads to keep their positions. Divorce is frowned upon in the district. One former staff member said they waited until the school year was over and they had resigned their current position to file for divorce because they feared they would lose their job, as they had seen others if they filed for divorce during the school year. One former teacher was told to either return to his ex-wife or quit. When he refused, he was let go, and his contract paid out to avoid a lawsuit. A vague statement was made by a board member to the media that led to this teacher being blacklisted locally. This leads me to my biggest offense of all. Although I have permission to share as many details as I want, including names, I'm going to be considerate and share the basics. In February of this year, a former teacher suffered a mental health crisis during non-school hours and proceeded to attend to his mental health appropriately. Instead of supporting the teacher and offering the services the district claims to offer for mental health, the teacher was segregated, chastised, intimidated, and browbeat into finally signing a resignation letter in March, and public statement written by the district's attorney. When the teacher requested FMLA to appropriately address his mental health, instead of supporting the teacher was told if he didn't release all of his protected health information, which he was not required to do, he would be terminated. The protected health information was then shared without his consent amongst the school board. The teacher's wife was pressured by junior high staff and the resource officer to get a restraining order against the teacher, which she refused to do as he was not a threat to anyone. The teacher's wife was questioned at her place of employment by the resource officer about the teacher and the incident, which is beyond his scope of duty and unethical.
Tammy is up, followed by Julie Peters.
I'm continuing Jamie's statement. The teacher's child was monitored by junior high staff and the resource officer to see who drove him back and forth to school, as this information was used to ultimately report back to Dr. Smock. There are so many more ways that the teacher was bullied, including showing up to his house unwelcomed and unannounced, threatening to withhold pay of his colleagues if they talked to the teacher. There are emails to prove all of this. You know why kids bully? Because adults bully. But no one wants to have that conversation. Adult bullies aren't interested in solutions and compromise. They are only interested in dominance, power, control, and breaking the spirit of others to build themselves up and getting what they want. Since I have provided some insight to a problem you profess not to know how to resolve, I'm opening the door to the conversation, and I guarantee it will become very uncomfortable for you, as it should. I'd like to reply to my proposal, and Dr. Smock, you know I am nothing if not persistent. So I propose this: independent auditor to evaluate the working environment in Morton Unit School District 709. Independent audit of all staff who resigned during Dr. Smock's term. Implementation of Dr. Ashley Fisher's proposed plan for the bullying hotline to include review of how all incidents were handled in the last 12 months and to include ability for students to report staff. Education of all administration and teachers on trauma-informed care, specifically in regards to drug-exposed, abused, and neglected youth. Mental health first aid and sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and cultural humility. I apologize. I have written a training that I'm happy to share regarding trauma-informed training. You definitely need it. Being upstanding isn't sticking together. A bully is too weak to stand alone. You need each other. So I ask you, are you weak or are you strong? Do you condemn the actions of the bully or do you support them? I also call for the resignation of Dr. Smock, Mr. Saunders, and Dr. Krall, and any of you I might have struck a chord with. Either stand up against the bullies or be one of them. And this is separate, this is me just saying, I am so disturbed by you, Dr. Krall. And you can't even look up as you write down at your paper. You are the biggest bully here. To believe that trans youth don't have a right to go to the restroom and make that your issue is disgusting. Disgusting, resign now.
Julie? Followed by Heather.
Good evening. I am the parent of a Grundy student, and I am also the step-parent of a student that attends Morton High School. I am also a mental health professional. I am a therapist. And I am also the product of having 2 public school teachers for parents. So in my public school education, allowed me the foundation of which I built 2 master's degrees and foreign travel, and allowed me to have a very eclectic worldview. So I'm a huge supporter, believer in public education, and I respect all of the work it takes to run a school district. I stand here tonight because I want to amplify concerns that have been happening over the past several months, starting with the board meeting that happened on September 5th. And I think we're going to hear more tonight about some of these concerns. But what I am the most concerned about is that we haven't seen a lot of action for the district to take a look at the complaints that have been happening. I haven't seen a lot of investigation. What I really call for is that we look into best practices for the district when it comes to LGBTQ students, when it comes to trans students, when it comes to students of color. I think the district needs to take a closer look about best practices and policies for public education for respecting the rights of these students. I took a look at the Morton census. As we likely know, Morton is 95% white, predominantly evangelical Christian, and predominantly affluent in terms of income and household income. And so what I am concerned about as well is the fact that we are not concerned about protecting the rights of the majority. The demographic of Morton isn't going to change. But what we need to do is make sure that we're listening to the lived experiences of people that don't represent those demographics. That's what the biggest problem, as I can see, is. We don't have a problem where there's reverse discrimination. It doesn't in fact exist. We don't have any threat to the folks that are predominantly evangelical Christian in this community. No policy change will impact anyone's religious beliefs. There's been a misconception that this is a topic where we need to talk about religion at the school board meeting. That is not correct. We need to be talking about the separation of church and state at the school board meeting. And I think that is where we're getting into trouble. What I will say is that there are many resources for best practices. The Human Rights Campaign has excellent information on this topic. The Trevor Project also has resources for public schools, and there are a number of other districts in the community that are starting programs that protect students, both of color and of LGBTQ status. We need to post safe spaces in our schools to let these students know that there are places they can go to be seen and heard. And finally, my stepson recently endured a bullying incident. He was wearing a shirt that said, "Black Futures Matter." A student came up and pushed him from behind in the hallway where he was completely taken aback. Unfortunately, there was not disciplinary action taken against the student. There was a statement made by Principal Ripka that simply said, well, I don't think the students understand the full implication of their actions. This is unacceptable. And these things need to be investigated. We need to have an outside audit come into the district to see if we are upholding the rights of students the way that we need to be doing so. I think that if we're living in a district where a student can be shoved and it can be seen on camera for a statement that Black Lives Matter or Black Futures Matter, there's something wrong. There's some kind of underlying problem in this district. Thank you.
Heather, and then Amy and Michelle will be on next.
My name is Heather McMeekin. I'm the co-president of Peoria, Illinois Now. And we have members who live in this district. And I don't need anyone's permission to speak up and stand with them and for their children. For several months now, we've been bringing you awareness of egregious rights violations for which what you should have done was to receive those complaints, at least pretend to show concern, and then show some response. That has not happened. Now, at the last school board meeting, a man named Nathan Fay got up and committed a crime against me, a crime called slander. A lot of the things that he said, you will find out eventually, were not true. But also, he professes to be a Christian. Last I checked, passing false witness, bearing false witness against somebody was a violation of the 10 Commandments. Wow, what an impressive Christian he is. But more importantly, it shows that you all will work together and try to intimidate and silence people. You'll allow engagement in character assassination. And then the conversation some of you had about me, I can't wait till you find out that that was actually a crime you committed against me called libel. Yeah, I was wrongfully terminated from Western. 2 of the people who did it were defendants in a lawsuit against them for the wrongful termination of a woman I helped file complaints to the police about for her boss on my floor threatening to kill her twice. I'm damn proud of that work. I am proud of standing up for my Black students and my gay students and my women students at WIU, and I was retaliated on for that. But that's okay. I'm going to set that aside because this isn't about me, but it shows your tendency as a board to take retaliatory action, which is a crime in the state of Illinois. And you are going to learn to do better by your students because you cannot continue this way. We notice all the wonderful flowery things people are saying about the people we have called to step down or be removed. And that's a tactic of authoritarianism, and that's when bullies kind of decide to all get together and validate the person they're so sure has done nothing wrong without even doing an investigation first. That's called a Title IX violation. You should have asked what people know and given them a chance to present evidence before calling them all liars.
Yes.
And you keep bringing up more and more people to validate what a great guy he is, and I'm sure we'll soon see a whole plethora of awards around the community for Michael Saunders and perhaps for you. I read some of your emails about the trans community. You as an MD, me as a former paramedic, and I hold my master's in community health ed. You should be ashamed, ma'am. I cannot believe the level of ignorance with which you operate as an administrator at this school. You're not the worst problem, but you certainly are one that especially picks at people like me who fight for the rights of women to be able to speak and serve, and then you use those rights to stab other women and girls and children in the back.
Yes.
What is up with that? Now, there's rights violations going on that you all are just not going to deal with, so I'm going to tell parents who are dealing with these, One of the tactics they've been using is to just want to have a conversation. Don't fall for that. Put all your complaints in writing, demand a written response. Put all complaints about rights violations also to the Illinois State Board of Ed. If there are IEP problems, then you can go to the Illinois Department of Human Rights. You can call the hotline for the Illinois AG Civil Rights Hotline. And for the egregious complaints against black students, well, we saw you, I saw you trumpeting all the test scores and everything in your predominantly white school that's richly affluent because you don't allow very many children who have IEPs or children who are from broken families, from challenging, traumatic backgrounds to have any chance of excelling here. And you allow your people to engage in a pattern of conduct that deprives them of social emotional learning, that traumatizes them for life, that violates their rights and allows them to be targeted for gender and race.
30 seconds.
Any parents who have concerns that their children have suffered these things, it is not too late to put in your complaints, but do it in writing. Never accept calls from the principal or your superintendent because we know they lie to people's faces. They've certainly lied about us and to us. From here on out, I hope you are all held accountable because your school is traumatizing for the marginalized students. They deserve better from all of you. The feds need to come in and restructure the school and investigate how you all have been operating as its administrators.
Yes, Heather. Yes.
Amy and Michelle. And then we'll be followed by Dan.
My name is Michelle Gady, and I'm acting as proxy to Ms. Amy Parr. Amy is a parent of students in the district. She filed a formal complaint that initiated an investigation. This case of discrimination and rights violations alleged against Morton 709 Ward Grundy Principal Michael Saunders for his treatment of an elementary school black child with a visual impairment and IEP for other medical issues includes being repeatedly barred from using the regular restroom, segregated to use the bathroom in the office, reminiscent of the time in history when black people had a separate bathroom and drinking fountain. Segregated elementary school black child with a visual impairment and IEP for other medical issues locker from their classmates and require the child place their belongings in Ms. Williams' room, completely barred from having a locker like or with the other kids and depriving them of social emotional interactions. Was segregating from engaging with peers during the school day, at school events, and before and after school. Was walked out of the school each day before the normal dismissal time, segregating the child from peers and depriving them of normal friendship, emotional support, and resiliency. Repeatedly deprived of their rights to PE, segregated to isolation in an office, giving no physical education, depriving them the means to regulate emotions via physical activity. Segregated from fun days at the end of the year, the school carnival, field trips, and celebrations. Deprived of the academic support to do the work, then punished for being unable to complete it independently. Academically punished for not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Directed by Saunders not to wear any more pride shirts with Love Wins on the shirt so they won't offend those who are anti-LGBTQ. Thereby normalizing LGBTQ+ othering and bigotry, and sending a message that allyship with other marginalized students is unwelcome in the school. Repeatedly had their IEP ignored or violated. My child's biological dad was murdered June of 2021. During and after the murder, funeral, grieving period, and trial, my child deserved reasonable accommodations and support, but instead their coping mechanism, laying their head on their desk, was repeatedly punished or portrayed as laziness or disrespect. During the 2022-2023 school year, Mrs. Friedrich often sent my elementary school black child with a visual impairment and IEP and other medical issues into isolation, deprivation into the hall or office or Sarah Williams' class, simply for putting their head down. Mrs. Friedrich would send them to Principal Monica Saunders' office or to the resource room to study independently without support. These teachers and this principal repeatedly refused to provide my suffering, grieving, traumatized, lonely child compassion, services, resources, and support, much less basic human kindness. Mr. Saunders clearly didn't want my black child at Grundy, targeting and subjecting them to traumatizing, isolated, segregated, unequal school and academic environments, depriving them of their rights, teaching them that they are unwanted, incapable, dehumanizing, untrustworthy, unwanted, as he was kept pushing us to push them out of that school. Mr. Saunders texted me frequently, even as I was fighting cancer and an infection that almost killed me, asking or suggesting that my black disabled child be kept at home rather than the school upholding their rights and providing an appropriate, supportive, safe learning environment. I support the calls for Principal Saunders to step down or be removed, for the school and superintendent to be investigated, and I want other parents whose children are being subjected to similar racism, ableism, segregation, isolation, and abuses of authority to know they are not alone. I encourage all to submit written complaints, and I hope the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights will investigate the Morton 709 school district leadership, policies, procedures, pedagogy, and practices to save other children from the cruelty and abuse my beloved, traumatized black child has suffered.
All right, Dan. Dan will be our final speaker.
Thank you, school board, for the time today. I want to first state that I completely am against bullying that's going on, and anybody who's being bullied should be stopped. But the calls are not against Diane, Michael, or Craig that people are really mad at. People are mad at Jesus. They can't get Jesus, so they will get anybody they can that loves him. In John 15:18 through 21, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed me, my teaching, they would obey yours also. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you and revile you, and spurn your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. It makes no sense that these people are after Michael, because he doesn't even talk to the people about Jesus at school. It's funny because it's illegal to fire Michael because he's a Christian. Religion is a protected class stated in the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Firing him would have grounds for a real lawsuit. But even if they can't get rid of the Christian leaders, if they get rid of all the Christian leaders and teachers in the schools, they can't get Jesus out of the schools. Jesus is everywhere, and Jesus loves all the kids in the schools. He will reveal himself to them through nature, other students, and any way he wants to, but you can't get rid of Jesus. If you're hating Jesus, why are you doing so? I don't believe there is any fact or logic that will convince all the people in this room. I think the only thing that can deliver us is God, so I'm going to pray to God. God, please fill this room with your spirit. Please bless everyone in this room with your peace, your joy, your strength, and your wisdom. Please open everyone in this room's eyes to see the truth. May the spirits and intentions behind the words become visible for all to see. Please deliver this school district to show us what to do. Please give us all of us insight into what we do not understand, and in all things may your will prevail. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to administrative reports, starting with the superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I've got a lengthy report. It's been several weeks since we've been together. So we have kind of a long break, longer than normal between board meetings. So bear with me. First, I just want to remind everyone, we just had Veterans Day just on Saturday. And I'd just like to thank personally all those in our community, all those in this room. If there's anyone out in the room, I know we have Mr. Neely and Mr. Rudd, Dr. Sander, Don Rademacher behind the camera as some of our veterans. And I just wanted to say thank you for your service. We appreciate you greatly. So thank you. Tomorrow is School Board Appreciation Day. And I'd just like to thank our school board members for all the time, dedication, and heart that you put into the job you do. It comes with some joy and it comes with some anguish. And it's always amazing to me that people will raise their hands to do these jobs with everything that it takes. Not just what it takes in this boardroom, but what it takes outside of the boardroom. So thank you very much for your service to our district. As you can see, we've got some appreciation shown by some of our students around the district, elementary, a lot of elementary school kids said thank you for your service, and I just want to say it myself. Thank you very much for everything you do. It's a pleasure to have you all on our leadership team, and I thank you for your service. I want to congratulate I want to congratulate our Morton High School volleyball team for an outstanding performance at state over the weekend. They placed 4th place. I think they would all tell you that at the beginning of the season, if you had told them that's where they would be standing at the end of the season, they would have been in disbelief. I saw all the matches at state at the Redbird Arena, and I can tell you they fought harder than anyone. They didn't have the height that many other schools had, but they had the heart. And they were always within just a few points of actually upsetting the other teams. So they even gave the former or the repeating champs a run for their money in their match. So just congratulations to Morton High School volleyball team. We'll get to meet them at the first December meeting, so we'll have them come in and we'll congratulate them personally for that, along with Morton High School Marching Band. They also competed at a pretty big competition, Grad Nationals in Indianapolis this past weekend. They finished 2nd in their class at Grand Nationals, which is a huge deal. It's much larger and much more competitive than even just what we compete with in Illinois. They placed 18th out of 92 schools across various classes there. That's the highest placement that our marching band has ever met. And they received the highest score that they've ever received in Grand Nationals at that competition. And the directors would tell you, historically, this is the best season that our band has ever had in its history. And so we'll get to congratulate the leadership, the student leaders in the band, also in the same meeting in December. But I just want to publicly congratulate the students, our co-directors, Katrina Fitzpatrick and Craig Hatter. Plus, there's a whole other team of leaders that are backing them up as well. So just congratulations to our marching band. So a lot of great things happening. A couple other just updates. Reminders, the bid opening for the MHS renovation project is going to be on December 13th. That has caused us to add a meeting, a special meeting just to approve the bids. So we'll open the bids on the 13th, then we're asking the board to gather probably just for the one agenda item of approving those bids, so we can do that before the Christmas break and we can start to get contractors ready and prepared for that project. So we're asking for a special meeting on the 19th. We'll plan for that. Realizing the late notice on that, we may not have all board members present, but I know I believe we'll have a quorum present for that. So thank you for adjusting your calendars for that. We have met with the architects as they've put together the bid documents. We've gotten to see some 3D renderings of the interior space. And although they haven't quite completed those yet with color and different things, I think they want to tweak them and make them really nice. They are fantastic. So you get a view of as if you were standing in the middle of the lobby that we're proposing and looking around at all sides. It's just it's overwhelming how beautiful it is and how spacious it will be when you get there. So As they finish up those 3D renderings, I will share those with the board. And it's been just a great process with the high school administration, working through a lot of details, all the way down to how many tables will the athletic trainer have and where are they located and how our bathrooms are situated. There's so many details associated with that, but our architects have done a fantastic job. They have a great team behind them as they put those bid documents together. So very excited about that. That'll be on the 13th. Parent-teacher conferences just concluded. This year, you're probably aware, we had split conferences where our 7th through 12th graders had their or parents and teachers had their conferences in October at our normal time, but our elementary just finished theirs in November last week. And we are in the process now of surveying parents and faculty about how did that go with them being split? Do you like them? So we'll share that information with you. I think it's starting to come in. I'm not sure if we've closed those surveys yet, but we're starting to see some results there. We need to know that. We need to know how everybody thought it went because we're preparing for the next year's calendar and we need to know whether we should do that again. So that's kind of what we're in the process of. And Dr. Sanders is leading the calendar committee, so he's anxiously awaiting the data on that so the committee can be informed. Are we doing these the same way next year or not? So it's a little bit about that. Food service update, as we have taken on the self-management of our cafeteria program, just would say that it's going exceedingly well. Crystal Lonis is doing a fantastic job as our manager. We're always tweaking things and trying to improve things. It's nice to have complete control over the program. We are in the process of surveying our students and asking them, so what do they think? So we're surveying 5th through 12th graders, getting their opinions. I'm sure they're gonna be blatantly honest with us, no doubt about that. So we're gonna take their feedback and see what we can do to improve things. And it is kind of nice now that we're in control of that more, that we can make those adjustments. So we'll be doing that along the way. Committees, we are still in the process of figuring out our formal negotiations committee, but Dr. Sander and I have met informally as a pre-negotiations meeting with the MEA leadership. And our goal is to start knocking out some of these kind of smaller issues. They could be contract language issues or some things that we mutually want to agree on a different way of moving forward. So we're working on that. We had a great meeting this week already and making progress on that. Of course, we will share all the details with the board along the way. We've agreed, even in this room, we've met, and we agreed that we haven't agreed to anything until the board has seen it and the whole MEA exec board has seen it. So just so you know, we're working on proposals behind the scenes to try to expedite the process for the Board of Education, whoever's going to be on that committee. So we're making good progress on that. We will share some of those details with the Board of Education in closed session because that's a negotiations topic, so we'll share some of those things with you. Another committee that met was the Extracurricular Mission Committee. Dr. Sander met with them and Mr. Neely, Ms. Lehman. And so is there just maybe a brief update on that?
Sure. So we met at the end of October, and we had 3 items on the agenda that we really wanted to cover. And the first one was involving students and best practices. And anytime that you're working with students, communication. That's what we're trying to focus on. And so one of the products that was put together after surveying, Ms. Ripka and Ashley Beyer put together a survey, and they sent it out to all the students that were involved with athletics and fine arts. And so we had 72 responses, and the information was great that they got back, and so it was communication focused. And so they put together a nice little info sheet that we can incorporate into what it is that we're going to do as a final product. So that was a really good takeaway on that. The other one was a survey, and this was Chris Carter and Jordan Williams. They put together a survey that consisted of about 33 to 34 questions. I think the junior high has used a variation of this survey in the past. And so the committee went through and they looked at a lot of the questions. It's something that can easily be adapted, that we could post out there on our website. One of the goals of using this is to streamline the communication, not waiting until the very end to have, bring information forward that would have been helpful if we would have done that during the mid-season. And so that was a big takeaway. So we've got a really good template that we can easily adapt as we move forward. And then with that, a couple of other things that were brought up was SEL and the NME for sports. And so Mr. Jones is going to be working with Stephanie Brown, I believe, on looking at the social emotional side and incorporating some of the things that we're doing with NME into our practices with the students, how it relates to extracurricular activities. And then the third thing is that we have 2 templates. And so the ADs are going through that, trying to convert their existing handbooks into those 2 templates. So we hope to have a meeting coming up here soon. I haven't set a date on that, but once we get both the handbooks pretty much in draft form, then we can revisit that and see about how we can display things like the survey and all the best practices for students. Ms. Lehman, Mr. Neely, do you have?
That's a good review.
I think you covered it well. I mean, these are big steps. As we look at the survey and getting information about coaches and how we can do a better job, looking at kind of our preamble, if we'll call it, and that is, as we've talked before, how important it is that when we look at junior high and junior varsity, those are developmental programs. So we have stated that, and I think we've been heard on that, and I think there's agreement, and I was really appreciate Scott's comments relative to the SEL. He went to a seminar, and some of the things he heard there, plus some of the other things that are taking place within the district, really was we need to step up our pace in that regard, and that was kind of touching to us, the way he outlined his comments to us. So probably said more than you wanted into this time.
No, that's perfect. It really mirrors what we're doing on the academic side of the house, so it's really blending both sides.
All right. Thank you for that update. Got one more item to talk about before we get to Illinois School Report Card presentation from Dr. Teeter. I just want to recognize Principal Ripka. Deidre Ripka was just recently announced to be the high school principal of the year for the Central Illinois Valley of the Illinois Principals Association. That's a 4-county area. And I just want to congratulate her. She's not here with us tonight because she's at the Game Ball Run dinner. So I'll re-announce this when she comes to the next meeting, probably in December. But I just want to let everybody know that we're very proud of her accomplishments. She's very deserving. She's an outstanding leader in our district. And just want to congratulate her publicly before it gets out from other means. So I want to let you know first. This award will make her eligible to be the Principal of the Year for the entire state. So there's a process associated with that. But I just wanted to let you know that she's been announced for our region. So congratulations to her. Before I move on, any questions about all the things? I know I ran through a lot of different things. You might have had a question along the way. I realized I just kind of bulldozed right through those items. Do you have any questions about anything that I've talked about?
Just a comment on the negotiation committee, since Dr. Cross isn't here, we'll put him on that committee. In fairness, I mean, we did to Andy last month, so.
That's a good point. Done. Well played. Second.
Thank you, Dr. Cross, for volunteering. It's appreciated.
All right, with that, I'll turn things over to Dr. Teeter.
First off, before I start on the Illinois School Report Card, I too want to thank the board for your service. Colleague and I, who came the same year, were talking about how much, today we were talking about how much things have changed in the last 30 years, I guess it's been. So, and Tom's got a head start on me, but It's just amazing when you've been here that long to see such change, and you know, it truly is because the board has always been insistent on a growth mindset. And so I may not always look super thrilled when someone says, well, what are we gonna do to improve, or what's, you know, how are we gonna improve? But it really has paid off, and I can attest to that for 30 years, and that's in large part to not only this group of board members, but also the other board members for the past 30 years. So thank you for your service. With that, the Illinois School Report Card. Tonight, I want to focus on some comparisons to the state of Illinois. Back in August, we looked at just our overall meets and exceeds and some of our growth in the areas of the map. So tonight, what I want to do is that it's that same data, but now that they've released the statewide data, how we kind of stack up against other districts in the state. So one of the things that is part of the public eye is the summative designations. And as you know, we have 2 exemplary schools, Lincoln and Grundy. We have one that is like a 1.5 away, the high school, and then the other 3 are commendable schools, which are all exceptional schools. Here's how those designations are calculated. You can see in the top half for elementary and middle schools, 75% of the total indicators are academic, and 25% are based on quality and student success indicators. And if you dig in a little deeper, you can see the big factors are growth in both English and math. That makes up 50% of the elementary and junior high summative designation. And if you drop down, the chronic absenteeism makes up for another 20%. So 70% of our total designation is based on our growth and our levels of chronic absenteeism at the elementary and junior high. Proficiency in ELA and proficiency in math and proficiency in science are much smaller percents. That only accounts for a total of 20%. And then there's some other small percentages as well. At the high school, they use different, even though it's divided up 75-25, they use different metrics in there. And you can see at the high school, the biggest metric is the graduation rate, which counts for 50% of their designation. Their proficiencies in terms of ELA, math, and science also adds up to about 20% between the 3 of them. And the chronic absenteeism accounts for 10%. And so between graduation rate and chronic absenteeism, that's about 60% of the total score. And then there's some other very minor ones as well. I will point out, because our English learning progress to proficiency group of students is so small, we don't get measured in that. And so that 5% gets redistributed across other areas. And I'll kind of show you that as we go through this. So if you're wondering why, I thought he said 7.5%, but it's like 8.6%. That's because that bit got redistributed amongst others. So anyway, that's how the designations are balanced. A short history lesson. The whole goal of this new designation system was to look at a school in a larger perspective than just do kids meet and exceed. And so you can see growth in there, you can see attainment in there, you can see attendance in there, climate survey in there. So there's a bunch of other things to give you a broader picture. The actual process for calculating this is, the first step is you get the raw data, that's the performance data. It then gets converted on a scale of 100 to 0 to an indicator score, and then that indicator score gets weighted by those percentages that I was just showing you. So, 100 in the academic proficiency for ELA then gets dropped down to, if you get all the biggest score you can in that, then it drops down to 7.5 points, or in our case, it's like I said, closer to 8.6 because of the way it gets divided up. Then they add all those index scores up, and that becomes your summative designation. And then, of course, the final designation, like I said, all of our schools are exemplary and commendable, and the difference between those 2 levels is exemplary is in the top 10% of all the schools in the district, and commendable is not. But otherwise, the other criteria, having no subgroups under 5%, or I'm sorry, having no low-performing subgroups, or having if you're a high school, having a graduation rate of greater than 67% is the same for both exemplary and commendable. So the only difference, again, between our exemplary schools and our commendable schools is the exemplary ones did their total score was in the top 10% of the state. So just kind of a FYI. So a really cool new graphic on the Illinois School Report Card. This thing is awesome. If you haven't hit this thing, I wish Dr. Cross was here because I know he loves the scattergram. I don't know if this competes with the scattergram, but this is right up there. If you go into, and this is not on the district page, you have to go into each school page individually. These are the high school graphs. If you go into the school page, you'll see one of these two. It's under accountability and then I think summative designation. You'll get this picture. The picture on the left shows all the areas that make up these summative designation, and the box sizes replicate how much of a factor they are. So you can see graduation, the big one, right? That big purple box in the center. That's the biggest part of their designation, and then the smaller ones represent obviously smaller percentages. And then it shows you the points for each. And so you can see, I guess I was mistaken, it's not 8.6, it's 8.04% is what that actually is. Instead of 7.5% for ELA proficiency, it's 8.04. And you can see at the high school, they got all their points for ELA proficiency, they got all their points for math proficiency, they got all their points for the graduation rate. You cannot get any better in any of those three areas, and they got all their points for the science proficiency. Those are the biggest score you can get. As a matter of fact, all of our buildings, every building got the highest score you can get in ELA proficiency, got the highest score you can get in math proficiency, and got the highest score you can get in science proficiency. Every one of our buildings did. So in terms of proficiency levels, we're as high as you can get in the state of Illinois. Now, that's not to say we can't do better. We can't have more kids meet next year. I'm not trying to infer that. It's just in terms of what the state calls successful, we've hit it. Now, the cool thing about these pictures, and like I said, the one picture on the left, the boxes represent by the weighting. The picture on the right are the index scores. That's that score out of 100. You can see, again, the 100 out of 100 in the one areas I just talked about for graduation, ELA proficiency, math proficiency. But the really cool thing about this is you can select one of those boxes, any of those boxes, and see where we shake out compared to the rest of the state. Now, I would have loved to have talked about this all night, but I know probably some people want to go home at some point. So I only picked one area to talk about, and that's chronic absenteeism. And so if you would actually select the chronic absenteeism box and hit that, you're going to get this graph. And this is all the schools in the state of Illinois and where we shake out. And you can see that for Morton High School, that's where we fall. And those ranges represent the index scores, and we fall right to the, towards the upper end of that spectrum. And again, you can do that for any of those assignments. So if you're looking at some of the different schools and want to see where they shake out, you select that, and you can see compared to the rest of the state, here's where we fall. Just to talk a little bit about chronic absenteeism, and then we can come back to that picture if you want. I guess before we get into the details on chronic absenteeism, this turns out to be the most confusing graph a person could ever make in their life. I almost deleted it right before the meeting started because it's meant to show you how chronic absenteeism has changed over time, but as Dr. Smock astutely pointed out, you did it backwards. It's the right, on the far right is the oldest data, and on the left is the newest data. And I know usually in America we read left to right, but was trying something different and something fun, trying to go right to left. And the other thing that's a little quirky is you want to get a bigger number is better. It means less chronic absenteeism. And so you can see on the far right, that's pre-pandemic. Those were our levels for chronic absenteeism. And then on the far left is after the pandemic this past year. And then I put on the right side, those don't represent the percents of our chronic absenteeism. That's actually the formula used to calculate the index score for chronic absenteeism. And so an easy way to kind of look at that if you're really math curious, the high school you can see is like roughly right at 60. It has an index score of 60. Their chronic absenteeism is 20%. So 20 times 2 is 40, subtracted from 100 is 60. That's how you get the index score.
What's the definition of chronic absenteeism?
I'm glad you asked, because that's going to advance the slideshow even faster. The students who missed, I keep asking, I just keep booking through. If you want to get to the end, just say, what was our overall percentile rank as a district? I can get to the last slide like right now. So the definition, and this is kind of an, this has been around for a while, but I don't think most people caught on to what the change in definition is. This is students who have missed 10% or more of the school days per year with or without a valid excuse. So if a family goes on vacation, if a student gets sick and goes to the doctor frequently, if there's any combination of doctor visits, hospitalization, sickness, vacations, if you miss more than 18 or 17.6 days in a school year, you're counted as chronically absent. So chronic absenteeism isn't like the truancy we grew up with, where if you didn't show up to school and didn't have a valid excuse, you were considered truant. It's just strictly absent. Who's been absent that much of the day, or that much of the year, I apologize. And so that's the definition. Below, those bullet points represent some of the things as a district, because we've had some conversations about chronic absenteeism, on how to try and reduce the chronic absenteeism in the district. One way that we are working at is we do these quarterly notices. So at the end of quarter one, if you have 5 absences, you get a letter and it's a nice, hopefully it's a nice letter. I think it's a nice letter. I saw the letter. I took it as a nice letter. Maybe not everyone does, but it essentially says it's important that you are at school. That's how you learn, and we want you to be here. So you can see the divisions for each quarter, 5 after quarter 1, 10 after quarter 2, and so forth. We have a school that does a wellness wall. When students are absent, they post it on the wall and just, so that you recognize that we miss you, you're not here, and we want you to be here. There are a few schools that are doing social media campaigns, sending out flyers to families, posting different things on Facebook about the importance of attendance. Today, when I was meeting with the broadcasting group, it is my understanding that not only is Ms. Ripka Principal of the Year, but I got the vision that she has set for the broadcasting group to make this movie on why you should come to school. And if it works out like the broadcasting folks talked about today, that's gonna be awesome. She might be up, Steven Spielberg-ish. We might not have her as the principal anymore. But anyway, and then of course the last thing, which has always gone on, is home visits. Just a chance to talk with parents one-on-one, and just the importance of being in school. So that's chronic absenteeism. The other one of these I wanted to show you, and remember you get to this picture by that schoolhouse graphic, pushing on any of the things. If you're on the high school page and you press the overall score, it shows you where Morton High School stacks up with all the rest of the schools in Illinois. And that vertical black line is the 10% cutoff. And you can see Morton High School is just a smidge to the left. Now, one of the things that I did because this is a cool graphic, you can't help but do stuff with this. One of the things I did is I sent an email to each of the principals and just shared, based on where your school fell, if you wanted to be moved to exemplary in the future, here's some areas that would help move the needle on the summative designation. Not that the summative designation is the end-all be-all, but certainly it is, here's some ways you can move to your needle further to the right and get closer to exemplary. Interestingly, I believe at the high school they had a 67% return rate, 69% return rate on the 5 Essential survey. I think they only needed about another 2 or 3% more, and they would have had enough points to be exemplary. So when you get that email from the school saying, hey, can you fill out the 5 Essentials, apparently it's a big deal. So. And there's a couple other, small changes that would have got them over the hump. So anyway, I'm only showing you the high schools because, like I said, they were super close. And at one point in the preliminary data, they were actually listed as exemplary until the state recalculated stuff. So.
On the 5 Essential, I'm trying to see if this will go ahead again. On the survey.
Now you're dragging us down, Tim, but ask away.
On the survey, it's just based on not the results of the survey,
Correct.
just number of surveys.
Yeah, and that's
so you can have 100% bad surveys and
correct.
still get
a better score.
Right, or 50% great would be less.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. So The scatter plots I show each year. This first one is and I'll spend a little bit of time explaining the first one, then we'll zip through the next few. This is IAR, ELA scatter plot. The x-axis is the per pupil instructional expenditure in dollars. So you can see left to right is what the per pupil expenditure is. And the up and down is the percent meeting or exceeding. So this would be our 3rd through 8th grade students. The red triangle represents Morton. Any dots above us are schools that scored better than we did. And all those dots below us are the schools that didn't score as well as us. And then if you're on the live site, you can hover on some of those dots, or you can hover on any of those dots and see which schools, like for example, there's that dot in the upper left that spends less money and has great results. And if you're really curious who that is, you can hover on that dot and it'll tell you who it is. Or you can go way to the right and see that school that's spending almost $19,000 per student and is barely getting 10% of the kids to meet or exceed. But we're the red triangle. So that's ELA, and again, that's just IAR. This is just the high school, just the 11th graders, just SAT. Again, you see our red triangle. Not many dots above us, which is outstanding in just ELA. This is IAR. Again, our red triangle. There's a few dots above us, but not many. And the last of the scatter plots, this is the SAT in math for just the high school. So those are the scatter plots. And again, you can find those on the main site, and you can dig into that if you want to see other schools and select, what schools are out there that you're interested in. This next part is new. This is something that ECRA, this company that does we've done a lot of work with, helps us analyze data. And so these are percentile rankings for our district for this year. And just kind of as a clarification, every district in the state counts as one entity. So if you're Deer Creek, student body of, I don't know, maybe a couple thousand, you're one school district. If you're Chicago Public Schools, you're one school district. Doesn't matter that you got 300,000 students in Chicago Public Schools, you only count as one school district. And so these percentile ranks are based on taking every district in the state, lining them up from the best ELA proficiency to the worst ELA proficiency, and then you get your percentile rank. So it doesn't matter that some of the districts are much larger than us and some of them are much smaller than us. Each district counts as one. And so you can see percentile-wise, because the question always comes up, or it's really not question, but it's really hard to grasp. Like when you look at our percent of proficiency in ELA, this year was 60.9%, and in math it's 47.9%. And it's hard to understand how can that be successful if only for math 47.9% of our students met the target on IAR. We're at the 90th percentile in the state. So there's a bunch of other school districts they're trying to figure out how something lower than 47.9% is okay. And so you can see our percentile ranks. The first three columns are 2022. The state value is the middle value in the state. That represents the 50th percentile. So that can give you kind of an idea of the spread of the scores. So for example, the one that's perplexing to me is like ELA participation. Our participation rate this year was 98.7. The state value is 99.1, and that puts us in the 35th percentile. I mean, we're only off of that thing by like 400 or 4/10. So it's a pretty tight spread there, is I guess what I'm saying. Not all the percentile ranks do you want to be high. As you look at this, for example, the community college remediation, you want a low percent of students that need remediation when they go to community college. You don't want your high school students to need remediation in order to be successful at community college. So the fact that our percentile rank is incredibly low, you can see This year, the state average was 19.8% of the students that went to community college needed remediation. And for Morton, it's only 13.6, and that puts us down at the 30th percentile. So again, these are just some percentile ranks. I'm not sure if there's any of these in particular you want to talk about, or, yeah.
Is there a way for you to find like schools, meaning unit district, 3,000 students?
You know what?
Does ACRA have that information where you could drill down and do comparisons?
Let me email ACRA, because I had emailed them earlier today about, is this data going to be like super skewed if Chicago public schools are packed in there? Because they've got 300,000 students and we've got 3,000 students. They're just going to, skew it something fierce. And they explained, which when we get to that slide, I'll remind, for school data, Chicago public schools was taken out, otherwise it would. They're 20-some% of the schools in the state of Illinois. But for district data, because every district counts as a single entity, they are in the data. So let me find out. I would assume they're comparing, for us, unit districts against unit districts, but I don't know that for a fact. So I think these percentile ranks would be all unit districts. I don't think like a Roe Bean, which is a K-8 district here in the area, would be a part of this, but I need to verify that.
Your scatter plot's based on number of students.
Well,
It's good, right, because this cost per average per student, there's 12 dots to the right of it, and there's 100 to the left.
it is, that the dollars per student is based on right.
But I'm saying that's not an average, it's weighted per student, so say District 150 has 14,000 kids. They get counted in there 14,000 times, we get counted in 4,000 times.
No.
Has to be, right? Because otherwise the average would be in the middle of the pack.
They take the number of dollars that District 150 has in their ed fund.
Right.
And they divide by their number of students, and that's how they get their dollars per student.
But but in the scatter plot, it's weighted though, right? By the size of the district.
Well,
I think so.
Because the vertical line is in the center of the plot.
The vertical line would be way in the center of the pack. Correct? So the bigger districts have a bigger weight on it.
well, the x-axis left to right is how much dollars per student you're
Go
spending.
back at it.
Yeah. Sorry if I'm not
You're
understanding.
fine. I'm sure it's my problem.
Well, for crying out loud, no one's made me go back on
Dollars
scale.
per student, doesn't matter how many students.
I'm saying, obviously, if this line, these have to be weighted higher than this.
Oh, I
there's
see.
a lot more
For the
dots.
state average, yes, yeah.
So,
Yes.
District 150 or whatever gets counted has a lot more weight than we do.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry, the state average, you're right, is based on, the dots are.
And then you go to the next graph, your next charts, it's just, it's like the Senate, one district has one vote.
Correct. Just like. Other questions?
Which makes this more relevant, really, probably because bigger districts probably include more inner city, which has less, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this actually proves that we're doing better.
I did learn a lot about CPS today. They got their own website. It's pretty awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Moving on, these are just some percentile rankings that are based on some other metrics that are found on the school report card. And again, one district counts as one, so CPS has an average teacher salary that gets plotted on the thing. So you can see, and you should have access to all these in your board folder, with the exception of the next slide. I snuck this one in after I gave it to Valerie, because I just couldn't help myself. Any questions or conversation on this one?
Yeah, this one doesn't have a lot of meaning when you consider Chicago and the suburbs, and you then consider the school districts in southern Illinois and what have you. To have an average salary is,
Yeah, there's definitely an
I'm not sure what
economic
value
diversity
that is.
between north of I-80 and, yeah, you're right.
But go down to even the rural schools in
Right.
Illinois.
Right, yeah.
Cost of living is greatly
Way different.
across the state.
This one I tossed on there. This is the surprise slide that didn't make the cut. And I put this one on there simply because of the chronic absenteeism. Because I was just curious, percentile wise, I'm just amazed that our chronic absenteeism is as high as it is. I just wouldn't have guessed that. You can see as an overall district, our chronic absenteeism this year is 15%. The state average is 21.6%. And this is another one that's good to have a low percentile. And so, you know, we're towards the bottom of this, which is a good thing. But I'm still surprised our chronic absenteeism is so high. And then you can see truancy, which is the, you know, they're gone without a valid cause, is much lower. I don't know if there's anything else on here that's of interest. These are the school percentile ranks. And these are the ones where CPS was left out of. And I took, for our elementary buildings, their row represents the average of the 4 buildings, not the average of all students, but each building added together, divided by 4. That's the percent of meets and exceeds in 2022 and in 2023. And then that is their average percentile. There are 4 percentile ranks added together and divided by 4. And so you can see our elementary schools, our junior high, and our high school. So again, it kind of gives you some idea of, you know, when we look at, you know, for example, at Morton High School, when you see 43.7, well, I guess that's 2 years ago. So when you see 55.9% of our students meeting or exceeding on ELA, is that a good thing? Well, it puts us in the 95th percentile, which is, you know, pretty good. Not pretty good, it's really good for the district. Of course, the next slide is math. Exact same data, but now for math. And then this is our overall rankings over time since 2016, 2017. You know, the 22, 23 percentile ranks were on that first one for our that first slide I was showing you for percentile ranks, but then this is historically how we've done since 2016, 2017. And then the last slide is kind of a review from August. I've added a little bit to it from August. You know, we talked about, you know, what do you do with this data? What happens with this data? I mean, show it to the board, we have a conversation about it, but then what do we do with it in terms of improving how we operate as a school district? And so one thing we do is we break this data down into smaller groups, and as I shared, I've sent out emails to each of the buildings just talking about, in terms of a summative designation, what are some things that would help improve the summative designation? Not that that's the end-all be-all, but it is a big metric for the state of Illinois, so it's something to consider. There are reports in, there are IA reports that show how our kids do by standard. And so we have began at the district level with the instructional coaches starting to take a look at those to see, are there specific standards that need to be addressed. We also, in October, I shared the board presentation with the elementary teachers that I shared with the board, I think in August. But I shared with the elementary teachers, and we talked about specifically, you know, our 3rd grade scores have been going down, and we talked about here at the board meeting that the 3rd grade class last year is the class that would have had kindergarten in 2020 and missed half a year and then had that really rough 1st grade year. And so started the conversation with them about, okay, these students are now 4th graders. What do we need to be doing for these students to get them back where they need to be? And how do we make sure that this downhill trend doesn't continue, that it really was because of COVID and not just because of some other changes? And so in November, the grade levels got together and had some conversation about that, and the principals met with the grade levels, and so tomorrow morning, we'll spend some time going through that conversation with each other and then look at some next steps for that. So that's some pretty explicit ways in which we're using this data to move forward. Obviously, we've had this focus on standards so that we make sure we're teaching and spending our time on what's important, we're supposed to be teaching, and not just things of interest. Not that things of interest are bad, but we do want to make sure we're focusing on what's we're supposed to be. So that's kind of that instructional efficiency. And then, of course, the 6th through 9th grade transitions. That is just, as you know, a big deal. You go from being a 6th grader, 2 years at the junior high, and then you're a high school student. That happens pretty darn quick. And so for some of our early releases, we've had our 6th grade teachers meeting with our junior high teachers, talking about not only how does curriculum align between 6th grade going into 7th grade, but then also what are some of the expectations. We've talked about iPads, how iPads are used or how they're managed. This past month, we talked some about homework, what homework looks like, what that expectation looks like. Is it consistent, or does it make a logical sense when you go from 6th grade to junior high? So those are some of the things going on there. And then obviously, we have this focus on individual student needs through our MTSS program, where I think we shared last year some with the MTSS program, that spreadsheet that we have for every student in the district at the elementary that has on there their MAP scores, their BAS scores, their how they're doing in the classroom, and we meet. I'm not there, but people meet to go through those and identify the students in most need of help, and then create a plan for how do we help those students. And then in 5 weeks, 6 weeks, they meet again to see, did that plan do anything? Did it make a difference? If not, should we adjust that plan? If it did, should we continue that plan? Or if it really did, should we now stop providing the extra help because they've caught up? And so again, those are just some things, just some examples of how this data fits into all that. So with that, are there any questions?
Can you go back to one of the earliest slides where it showed the ratios on the school designation scores?
Yeah,
Probably like slide 2 or 1.
I can do that. This one?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I made this point last year when we talked about this, but it bears repeating, I think. The ratios on how this is calculated, how are we rated as a school or as a district? And I just want to make the point again that this isn't how we would recommend it, right? That only 7.5% of our complete rating is in English language proficiency, ELA proficiency. Only 7.5% is math proficiency. That only 15% is how proficient we are in those two major areas. And that 50% is graduation rate when, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here, Dr. Teeter, what is the percentage you need of graduation rate to get the full points? Do you remember that number?
Yeah.
It's pretty low.
Yeah, it's high, yeah.
It's under 70, right?
Yeah,
I don't think, not to get full points. I can get you the number.
The point is, most schools can accomplish all the points there. So if you're being rated, and most schools can accomplish those points, but your rating on how well your students perform on the key topics, science, math, and English, are only add up to 20% of how you're rated overall. English language learner or English learner progress at 5%, which is a small population, an important population. But these aren't the ratios we would want to try to judge how we're doing as a district. But they are the ones we have to live by. So I just want to make that point that and I think you showed with the topic of the climate survey, that's participation based. And so we do all this work, our kids perform at such a high level, but then if people don't participate in a survey that we can't force them to participate in, we don't get the points and we miss a designation level that we could have met. Very frustrating. I just want to express that. To me, it's frustrating that we're not really, this isn't a great way to judge the performance of schools, in my opinion. So
The other thing to note with the proficiency, for those of you that have been in education forever, it's kind of the same deal as the No Child Left Behind. Where today the threshold for getting all your points for proficiency is here, like at 40% or some crazy low number that a lot of schools jump over that hoop, but it ratchets up every year. So 10 years from now, when they're expecting 60% to meet or exceed, all of a sudden getting that 7.5% will be a little more of a challenge. So it will start to it ratchets up every year. You know, I think the number before we start seeing an effect will probably be another couple of years, 3 or 4 years. But so to that end, like Dr. Smock said, you know, we don't look at that and go, oh, we got all the points for proficiency. I guess we got it figured out in English and we have it figured out in math. We certainly know what those percentages are, and we certainly know those percentages can be better, and there's certainly ways that we focus on making those percents better, even though those type of things won't affect our summative designation.
I think the graph where it shows it year to year, right?
Yeah.
For the last 6 years or whatever, with a couple of COVID years missing, we're keep going up.
Yeah.
And that's independent of what the testing is. That's saying, how do you compare? Because each school we're comparing ourselves to is taking the same test or to the same standard.
Correct.
And we keep elevating ourselves. And so that's a positive note, and that doesn't mean that we can't. Craig was complaining, similar to his grumpy board member said, you'll never be good enough. Maybe me. But the point is, I'm saying, no matter where we're at, we need to continue to improve. So like your last slide said, what steps are we taking to get better? Yeah. And that needs to continually happen, and just, you guys know that, but I'm just saying that's our job to make sure that happens. And then my other comment would be, I think the chronic absenteeism, I think for Morton should be semi-concerning.
I agree.
I mean, we wouldn't expect that in this district, I guess. So it's.
Yeah. And if that transfers over to the work world.
Right.
Exactly.
And I guess one final comment is that I think the data is more impressive knowing that each district is counted equal, independent of their size.
Yeah.
We've got our work ahead of us.
Yeah.
So we're working on that. As Dr. Keeter indicated right out of the gate, you know, we have a growth mindset here. It doesn't matter whether we don't like the system for designations. We're looking at the data and asking ourselves, how can we do better? And that's what we're going to continue to do. So. Thank you, Dr. Teeter.
Any other comments for Dr. Smock before we move on?
I think that was great information and appreciate that. And the growth mindset is what's so important when we think about our role. It's truly to make sure every student is growing, and I'm not sure we didn't get into some of the details, but when we think in terms of 25% of our students probably are in the low income. Is that correct? In the range? So it was reported earlier that we're such an affluent that we don't have to worry about some of those students that kind of struck me kind of hard.
Yeah. Yep. Good point. Okay. Any other questions?
That will move on to the President's report. And with that, I'm going to start with a statement on behalf of the Board of Education. So, on behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to make a statement relative to the number of public comments that were made at the last few board meetings. First of all, with respect to bullying and harassment, our stance has never changed. We are intolerant of any disrespect or mistreatment of students, and all students are to be treated with respect and dignity. We will respond to every report of mistreatment of students. Board Policy 7-180 has been reviewed and approved by the state of Illinois, and we have taken steps to communicate with our faculty and staff to ensure that our policies are followed and incidents are reported. We will continually provide professional development on this topic for our teachers and staff. According to our administration team, the term bullying does not always define the disrespect that we seek to correct in our students, and we are not experiencing an increase in these behaviors. It has always been a continual effort throughout the years to educate our students in how to treat one another respectfully and how to behave when we disagree with one another. We review all our policies on a regular basis. We are making an honest effort to review some of our pertinent policies in order to make improvements where needed. This review has included considerations for suggestions from those speaking in the audience presentations. When amending our policies, we must ensure that they abide by the First Amendment and are neutral with respect to all groups and topics. We will continue to review our policies and discuss them openly, and we will continue to ensure that they are properly followed. There have been a number of times during audience presentation segments of our meetings where false innuendos and mistruths have been spoken publicly. The board will not be responding or reacting to inflammatory and unfounded accusation statements, but a lack of response should not be construed as accepting them as true. Whenever corrective action is taken with an employee, that is done privately. The board and administration will never divulge conversations or actions with our employees that are disciplinary or remedial in nature. Just because the public does not hear about such steps does not mean they did not occur. The board acknowledges that mistakes have been made relative to our policies, and we have worked to correct and remedy those errors. And finally, no administrator or board member will be resigning, and no administrator or board member will be removed. So that is our public statement. Moving on to the balance of my report, just to compliment some of our successes. The volleyball they got their 4th in state, and they had 5 sets, I think, and they lost by a total of 1 point between all 5 sets. So that's pretty impressive that they lost 4 of them by 2 and won by 7. So the cross country, Joe Zeller will probably be hearing from him tomorrow because you didn't mention him. They did well at state, the boys and girls both. And congratulations again to the band for their success. Just to note, we put out a video on Veterans Day congratulating or thanking all the veterans. I thought that was extremely well done. It was just neat to say thanks to those who've given us the freedom to live in this great country. So, and then thank you to the teachers and the admin that got the thank yous and the students who wrote the thank yous, but I'm assuming the teachers and the admin might have had something to do with that because probably when I was in school, I'd probably say there's what, a school board? So, and just to echo Tom's comment just a second ago, the school report card, it's great to see we have continual improvement because that's truly why we're here to educate the children. The sports and band is excellent, but the education is the core of what we're to do. And so it's great to see the continual improvement, and we need to continue to focus on what we can do to ensure that continues. So that will be it with my president's report. And now anything for agenda building.
Yes. Communication, that's one of our goals. It says right here that we'll have two-way communication, providing timely information. I get lots of communication from constituents. The biggest thing that I would like to let the administration know is two-way communication. They're very appreciative, specifically the surveys about the
Parent-teacher conference?
Yes, parent-teacher conferences being back and forth, so they're happy that they're two-way communication for that. Regardless if they agree or disagree with it, whatever comes out, they are appreciative of the two-way communication. So I want to make sure that I did mention that. CareU, more communication, awesome. The athletic communication surveys, more communication, awesome. The communication gets put out every Friday, the Potter Post, the videos for the video team. My point is the communication back and forth from my constituents, they are very, very satisfied and happy with the communication. They might not always like what they hear, but at least they're hearing it. So I want to make sure during the agenda time that everybody is aware of the communication and the goals that we are hitting. Thank you.
Well said.
Anyone else?
On that same vein, I've been thinking about, since we have had such opportunity to hear public statements, ever since I've been in the district and attending board meetings, I've just often wondered, how do people get responded to? And sometimes it's public, but most of the time it's an email or a letter. And I was just wondering if there was any record that might be helpful to us, or a way we could make sure, that we have responded, so that, even if someone in the future isn't impressed enough to remember the response, there would be, just a record that, this person, we take names and email addresses so we can communicate back, but, is there a record that they were actually addressed in the manner that that was addressed, so that, that would be something they could request in the future if needed, or, if there were further questions about, did the board actually respond? Because we do want people to know we're responding, even though most of our responses have, for the reasons Mr. Breaker mentioned, have to be confidential. Has that been discussed before, or?
We've never discussed keeping, like, you're talking about having a certain place where you could go and find all the responses that the board has made to public comments? Is that what you mean? We don't have that. So that's something that the board wanted to do, that, have a certain location where we could go back and find out how did we respond to this or that. You wouldn't be relying on the superintendent or someone else, whoever responded, to tell you that you could find that in a certain location. I mean, that's something we could certainly do.
I'm just thinking we want to be accountable and make sure that, our statement that we will respond at the latest by the end of the next regular Board of Education meeting, we would want to make certain that that was done. And so just how can we make sure we're actually ourselves following our policy? And just knowing that people are taking their time and coming and preparing, and we want to give thoughtful responses and be responsible that no one falls through the cracks. Even if maybe we address the issue and 3 people brought it up, we want to make sure all 3 receive a response.
Could you possibly review that with your superintendent's groups to see if they have any procedures that they follow? Maybe someone has something and we could.
I think oftentimes in the past, we've seen the responses but not necessarily.
Historical, I think, is what she's after.
Well, Valerie keeps a record of everyone who comes and speaks, correct? Because I see people logging in and giving their information. I think, even something as simple as just email dated or note letter dated, then we could find it in the future. And since, so many things right now are being requested, it might just make it easier to find specific requests or things like that. If no one else thinks it would be helpful.
No, you're just talking like a log that they can go to, look, person X, statement Y with answer Z is what you're looking for, and then it's just gonna be a nice log that they can refer back to. That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
And if there's no answer because it's confidential, then you can put confidential off to it, and that's the answer, is it's confidential. So I think I understand what you're saying, and that way you can refer back to if person X says, on September 5th, we asked for this, but you didn't give it, and you say, yes, we did, here's where it's at. That's kind of what you're looking at, right? So you're holding the board and the administration accountable for the people.
True, and then if, as a board member, you are questioned, you can say, well, there is a log, and we can ensure that that was followed up on.
Because our board policy says we will get back.
Correct.
So
And so right now, we
what's the
know-
evidence of that?
Right, what's the evidence? We've got evidence from 2 weeks, but 3 months, say 3 months ago, it'd still get brought up, what happened September 5th? Okay, well, we answered that, the following board meeting in a long statement that he had put out. Well, we can go back and say, refer to statement, correct?
Could have said long, eloquent statement.
But, and some of the answers back to them, whoever it may be, is that we understand your question, but this is a personnel matter and.
Right.
And some of the comments do not require
Correct.
any, I mean, some of the comments are not, don't require, I mean, they're not asking a question, they're making statements, so.
Exactly.
True, the rhetorical,
Yeah.
certainly, and those, I agree, see board president's statement. It would be helpful for those who maybe didn't realize that we understood their comments as rhetorical to know that the response was covered in the public statement.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, Diane. Tom?
I think it's been said, I really appreciate tonight, most of all, the comments about all of the information and feedback that we've gotten from teachers and even parents this past couple of weeks has just been kind of touching. And then thank you for the podcast and recognition in the video for the veterans. It's an important thing to do, to thank our veterans for their service. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the many, many people that make sacrifice standing up for democracy so that whether you want to agree or not, people can come and make their comments, and we take them seriously. But
If it wasn't for Veterans Day, if it wasn't for veterans, English would be a foreign language.
there you go. That's a short version of what I'm trying to say. And thank you for still serving.
Thank you.
And I think your podcast, I just want to reflect for a moment. You drove home the point that it's not only the veterans that have sacrificed, their families have sacrificed, and sometimes that sacrifice goes on for years, and you don't know all of the sacrifices the families have made for that freedom, and I think you understand what I'm.
Good points, Tom. Thank you.
Moving on to discussion items, starting with the school board conference elections. Pretty proud of me, I figured out how to use the app so I can find it myself. So I'll just go first. I'm planning on introduction to collective bargaining, so I can tell David how to do it. What your superintendent wants to know but can't tell you, I think that should be good. Seems like he tells me too much. Setting district goals and strategic planning, monitoring district performance, trends in collective bargaining, and you can't make this stuff up, legal questions. That's what I'm signed up for currently.
I didn't realize you were supposed to sign up.
Well, I don't know if you signed up, I just put it in the app thing or whatever,
Okay,
so.
yeah, so put it in the app, yes. Gotcha, all right. So, yeah, because everything on Friday is like sign up and pay for it.
It is.
You can do that. I mean,
Thanks.
the district will reimburse you for it, I mean, it's one of the collective bargaining ones that.
So I'm looking at working together for kids, delegate assembly on Saturday, of course, And then depending on who's gonna be on the committee, I've got effective meetings, productive boards, trends in collective bargaining. I'd like to find out more about ChatGPT because IA seems to be the biggest thing going on right now. And then I've got productivity, Google productivity as another day. And there's another Google one that I thought, because I'd like to start combining calendars. Just combining the 7th grade basketball calendar into my personal calendar was a chore, so there's gotta be easier ways to do this.
I have real-world board scenarios, art of school boarding, which I did last year, but I thought it was really good, so I kind of want to do a refresh of it. Let's see, economics and policy in Springfield that will affect pre-K through 12. And school board evaluation, working together better, generational strategies, and you can't make this stuff up, I think you said that one. And Open Meetings Act and FOIA.
Okay, what I'm signed up for are new administrators, new board, how do we get started, FOIA and OMA updates, what your superintendent wants to tell you but can't. Then I have safety site assessments, and then I solemnly swear I'm up to good, your board oath in action, and then model of excellence in agricultural education as well.
Ooh. I'll be interested to hear that one. I am interested in going to the practical and doable climate changers, your board's voice navigating board policy, in transition legal requirements for trans students, and then I saw a labor negotiation through a team approach and was hoping it wouldn't be over my head since it isn't a basics. I'll look into the speaker a little more on that one. And then there is one that I'm hoping I will be able to make it to Saturday called Creating Trauma Responsive Communities.
On Thursday, I'm going to try and sit in on the equity symposium. Collective bargaining sessions, Google, and I'm gonna be tied up for a lot of different events, but I'm gonna try and squeeze in and out as much as possible. Thursday afternoon, we will be having our board of directors meeting. I think we're gonna probably talk about resolutions a little bit later, is that correct?
Yes, that's next.
And yeah, I'll save the comment I wanted to make for that, but it's going to be interesting.
Okay, I'm gonna be looking at the intro to collective bargaining. The Illinois Records Act, compliance and best practices. There's a policy and procedures presentation that I may try to get to that one as well. Then we've got safety site assessment, and so keeping up with the crisis management, and then trust and transparency and communication. So that's what I got on my schedule.
I'm most intrigued by the what your superintendent wants to tell you, but is afraid to. I'm dying to know what those things are. But probably get rid of that. I always gravitate toward the law workshops and learning more about that. I saw the collective bargaining one. I'm kicking that one around, but we've kind of done our own style here in Morton. It's been very effective, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from what other people do. So looking at that one. There's one about unfunded mandates, and I don't know if you saw that one. I don't know if that's just a complaint session or if there's actually something that there's some potential action on that. There's some on finance that's caught my attention. There's a technology Google one, maybe you mentioned, Jerry, that I've looked at. So haven't quite narrowed it all down yet, but those are a few that I've been looking at.
There's 2 Google ones.
Okay.
Yeah, one with the technology that I'd kind of like to hit as well, but there's other things I'd like to hit. So I don't have it narrowed down either, but yeah, there are 2 Google ones.
Okay.
you get a chance in the Google one, stand up and say, I hate Google and I like Microsoft. If you want.
Yeah, if I want, thanks for that. I thought you were ordering me to do that.
Okay. Seems like we have a fairly diverse group set of classes we're attending, that's a good thing, so. Hopefully
I
we
think,
can.
Dr. Smuck, you indicated we will be getting a presentation on AI,
Yes.
and I'm looking
That's
forward to
the
that.
December, I think that's our December meeting, yeah.
I knew it was sometime, I just couldn't remember when.
No. I was at one of the division meetings, and there was a whole session what the school district was doing there, and came back and we chatted about that, so.
So we have Don Sturm, Courtney Edelman, and Deidre Ripka are working on that presentation. I haven't seen it. I'm gonna be as surprised as you are when we see it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to say. I think it won't be all negative. I think they'll talk about some of the positives and the way it can be used in a positive way, and then the concerns that we have. So looking forward to see what they report on there. I know
It's
they're
here
tracking on it.
it's here to stay, so.
Yeah, I know they're tracking on it, especially Mr. Sturm, so. So just a reminder, it's been our practice when we've come back from the conference to report out a little bit of what we learned, a couple of sessions, and, share with the rest of the group. So just kind of keep that in mind, take a few notes, and be ready for that discussion when we return.
That will move on to the conference resolution discussion.
So there's 5 of them. And you probably saw in the information, I think it started on page 10, that's all I really looked at, to be honest with you. I read through them. And so really, Mr. Rudd wants some direction, right? Because you're gonna go to the delegate assembly and you'd like to know where our board stands on these 5 different issues that are gonna be brought forward. And in the writings, it describes the purpose or what the reasoning was that these different things were brought forward. And then at the end of it, it tells you kind of where the IASB stands in terms of a recommendation. But of course, we could have a different opinion than where they stand. So I don't need to do all the talking on this, but should we just start at the beginning and work through it?
So before we go too far,
Okay.
there's 5, and you talked about where the IASB stands. So the first one is industrial construction. IASB stands, do not adopt. If you agree with the do not adopt, then I need a thumbs up that you're agreeing with the do not adopt, not agreeing with the resolution. Okay? So if you agree with IASB, it's thumbs up. If you disagree with IASB, it's thumbs down. Are we clear on that?
Got it.
Same thing. If I get smashed by, whatever, and I can't make it, then my alternate, Dr. Cross, gets to.
It's me, Anderson.
Oh.
He wasn't here last month.
Yeah, that's right. So then now you understand that when you go through and do the check mark, it's you're agreeing with IASB or disagreeing with IASB. It's not agreeing with the resolution. Okay? All right, so now we can go forward.
All right. So you mentioned the first one. It was proposed to prohibit construction of industrial facilities near schools because of the health and safety for students, but these are local decisions. I think if you read the reason why the IASB recommends not to adopt, they feel like, industrial construction is up to the local community, and some small communities depend on these things. So the proximity of schools could be very close in a small community to whatever gets developed. So, I don't know. Again, I don't need to do all the talking, maybe you've been more familiar with it than I am, but.
Well, I think I think we should just either give it a thumbs up, and if you don't agree, then we can discuss. So all right, so everybody gave a thumbs up.
Everyone agrees to not adopt. Not adopt. Okay. Second one, school resource officer funding, asking for the state to provide educational funding to all schools for the cost of a school resource officer. And the resolution committee is recommending to adopt it. Okay. Bus driver regulations is about, and I don't know a lot about this, maybe Dr. Sander does, but it's about trying to make it easier for local bus drivers to get their licenses. And also involves some state funding for transportation reimbursement costs. So the general idea is that there's a shortage of bus drivers. How can we make it easier to get them instead of requiring, regionally recognized trainers, nationally recognized, and just to facilitate that process. So again, I don't know a lot about that.
I would just offer up, it was what they're asking for now, then legislation passed and it drove it to special training sessions. People have to go a long distance to become certified. And there were many districts that did their own training. And we're trying to make that simpler.
Thumbs up all around? All right, the fourth one is, so Faith's Law, we've talked about that before, but in case you forgot, that's our required process to do background checks, not just criminal background checks, but to reach out to former employers of anyone we're trying to hire and to ask a series of questions about sexual harassment history or other concerns. There's probably way more to it than that, but I think that's a succinct definition. And this resolution sought to not require any of that anymore and just use the Illinois Department of Child and Family Services reports, child abuse, neglect tracking system to fulfill that requirement. So in other words, we wouldn't ask former employers, we would just see if these people are in these databases. I think that's my understanding of it. Maybe it's overly simplistic, and you might say, well, that sounds good. There's tons of effort that's put into our current system right now to do that. What Dr. Sander has to do, what Brenda has to do. We've also used another company to help us. It costs us money actually to process this and the time. But I think what ISB, the resolution committee, is saying, this isn't the best way to do this. Even though they probably, behind the scenes, are saying, there are better ways to do it, it's just not this one. That's kind of the way my interpretation of reading this passage is. I think there is a better way to do it. I'll just say it's not involved with this, but to have a database set up where schools are required to report incidences that may not rise to the level of proof of an actual case, but there's allegations there or something, and even though I know there's legal implications to harming someone's chance to find a job without proof, that's a whole other aspect to Faith's Law that concerns me, and you'll see lawsuits over time on that. But it seems to me like it'd be best if there was a database that anytime we came across the situation, we reported it, and you didn't require, you didn't rely on contacting a former employer. Who's there, who's working there now? This could be a 10-year-old situation. There's no one there that knows it because nothing ever got reported. So again, I'm kind of going off on my own soapbox here, but I think there is a better process for this, probably just not what they're indicating here. So that's just my take on it. I don't know if anybody else has a comment about it. Good, bud? Yep. And the last one is alternative safe school funding. Basically, it advocates for additional funding to be provided for regional alternative safe schools. And you might think, well, that sounds good. We need them, and we do. And it acknowledges that in this writing that there are incidences of SEL, social emotional learning concerns and behaviors. But I think the gist of their recommendation, which is in the last paragraph, is that they don't think this should be a separate funding mechanism, and they just want to use the evidence-based funding process to fund alternative schools. I wish I could tell you more about the intricacies of that. I don't know that, but that's their reasoning.
Our discussion was that we already have position statements on this topic, and we don't need to add yet another one. And
Okay.
so our legislative staff is already focused on this.
Okay.
Then why didn't that make the do not present? That was my thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I should know.
Thanks for the behind the scenes on these
I
things.
should know I was there. Also, we're going to have at the delegate assembly, the election of officers. We have a new candidate to be for vice president. And I don't recall this happening before, but we're going to have someone run from the floor. So it might be a little bit interesting.
That'd be some fireworks.
Just forewarned, we will have a candidate running from the floor, and which could be interesting. I'm not sure how we're gonna deal with it.
They'll only let one delegate in that room.
Pardon me? Other people can come, but they can't be seated.
I thought you had to have a special pass to get into it.
If there's room, they've let people come in, but you need to have a pass to be able to sit at the tables.
My point is, if Andy wants to go with you, whatever, just experience whatever he can. No.
You gotta have the pass to get in. So if you wanna come,
I think we can get you there, but, and maybe I've just been able to bring people in, but.
I forgot who I was dealing with.
Okay, any further discussion on that? I gotta make a comment quick that I forgot to make in the school report card discussion, was we went down on number of kids entering college within 12 to 18 months. And they're indicating that's a negative. And that could be just an indicator of how well our trades classes are doing to entice kids to say, you know what, there's an alternative to college. So even though on the chart it looked like it was a negative, in reality, I'm not so sure it is, especially as someone that employs people in the trades, it's a positive, so
But as a nation, that's occurring.
Right. So
in a big way.
Yeah, so I just forgot to mention that, so. Plus Lisa didn't look ready, so. Just trying to stall. You are up, Lisa, for our tax relief grant presentation.
Thank you. Okay, so this is something I brought before you for the past few years, so this isn't new. We've applied for it, but we haven't gotten it. But as I've mentioned in the previous years, at some point I'm really hopeful that this might happen for us. So the main point of this goal, or the goal of this grant, is to lessen the burden on the local taxpayers, take it away from our taxpayers and shift it to the state, and we receive more money in evidence-based funding. So that's the ultimate goal with this. This whole calculation on how they come up with how the ranking is, I can show you my spreadsheet at some time and we can talk through it in detail if you'd like, but essentially they have their own way of figuring out who is at what level and who can basically get some use out of this funding. The application is due January 8th, so I'm presenting here to you tonight, and then in 2 weeks, hopefully you would approve that. I have to actually have the approval before I can submit it for, submit the application. There's almost 50 million again this year available, and again, that allocation depends on our ranking within the different districts that are on that list. Some of the things to keep in mind is that we have to do an abatement in order to make this happen for 2 years. But with the amount of money that comes in, and I think I have it on a future slide, it's like 1.5 years payback. So obviously it's something that it's in our interest to do, because we're gonna reduce our taxes for our local taxpayers. Last year, we were ranked 140. So what that means is that 139 school districts were in need of this money more than we were. This year, we're ranked 101. But not everybody applies. So every year it looks different. It could be all of them apply, which hasn't happened as long as I've been doing this grant. Or it could be enough apply and we don't get the grant, or maybe not enough apply and we do this year. I'm really hopeful. We're getting lower on that list. We're getting, higher on that list, right? So that we can maybe have a chance this year. I'm really holding out hope on that. Last year, only 130 schools applied out of 750 in the state. And 32 schools received the grant. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the funding falls as far as need. And again, it just depends on what other districts apply, whether or not we get that. So this year, so every year it's kind of changed. These numbers are a little different than they were last year. This year, the grant amount is just shy of 1.2 million. And compared to last year, we would have gotten just shy of $900,000 a year additional. So if we get this, it actually works to our advantage that we didn't get it last year. And we're gonna get a little bit more added to our evidence-based funding if we get this. So what does this mean? We abate for 2 years, like I said. We have to abate that $2 million, but we also receive the grant of $1.2 million. So our net loss in years 1 and 2 are just shy of 900,000. And then in year 3 and on and on and on, and hopefully evidence-based funding continues as it has been. It has been very consistent and reliable. And if that happens, then we will net profit just shy of 1.2 million. And like I mentioned, about 1.5 years payback, once we've established that. So what we've done is we file a levy in December. As you know, I presented. We approve it, we submit it by the end of December. We obviously don't apply for this till January, so then I would do an abatement if we are granted it. We should know end of January, February timeline, just in time for me to do the abatement. So they have worked that out. And then, as far as the impact of the Ed Fund Reserve, obviously we're going to lose money in the Ed Fund. I'm suggesting the Ed Fund because we are doing okay in the Ed Fund. We are healthy in that fund. But keep in mind, we're gonna be able to just put more money back as we go along. And in the end, the district is just in better shape by doing this. So I wholeheartedly think that this is a great idea to take a little bit away from our local taxpayers. Any questions?
Yes. Will the abatement, will that affect our plans for the high school renovation or anything like that?
Well, it won't change it. We will abate more, or I shouldn't say we will abate more. We will be utilizing more reserves in the Ed Fund if we do it the way that we planned it. Like I had suggested, take that $1 million from our interest income and moving it to the O&M so that we can help finance it. But I'm hopeful that, as I mentioned so many times, that everything could kind of change, and if we get more interest income, and these projects are going to take a few years in order to complete all of them, it might not be as negative as I am planning at this point in time, but I have to think. I don't know of additional funds at this point, so we can't plan on those. But overall, our Ed Fund is in a healthy state where this is not going to get us even close to that 180 days in reserves that we're required to keep.
And it won't affect the construction and?
No.
Are we looking for just a thumbs up, or do we?
I'm sorry?
What do you need from us, a thumbs up or just?
Well, actually, yes, you just need to approve this in 2 weeks, I think is our approval for this, Valerie.
Be an
Is that
action
correct?
item?
Yes.
Perfect, so,
Yep.
okay.
So tonight's just the presentation, so you guys can think about it, and then next time approve.
So our hope is each year, school districts achieve this, get this, and they get off the list.
Yes, yes.
Right? And that should help our chances.
Yes, because keep in mind, each school district has to do an abatement, and not everyone can afford that, right? And you definitely can't afford that time after time. And once they've received additional funds from the state, they're gonna fall down lower on that list than we are because we're not receiving that. So it's definitely a moving target. And I'm hopeful for this year, but can't promise, obviously.
This is our third time trying?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In the Vision 2030 meeting that I attended, we were talking about more funding through the evidence-based funding, making sure that's sustainable. But looking at the facilities around the state and the needs there, we need more funding for facilities, clear and simple.
Mhm.
And we'll be meeting again in January and then in April. And then we'll be getting everybody on board to do a whole lot more lobbying. The last time we had resolutions, and there's a big effort to get more funding so that we don't have to rely on property taxes for all of our funding needs. And we've been down that road many times, but we're trying again.
Thank you.
Moving on to action items. Accept a motion to approve the 24-25 proposed budget and 2023 levy, tentative levy.
Move that the Board of Education approve the 24-25 proposed budget and 23 levy as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
Dr. Kroll.
Yes.
Mr. Breaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
Mr. Neely.
Yes.
And Mr. Roth.
Yes.
Next, we will accept a motion to approve the teacher evaluation plan updates.
I move that the Board of Education approve the teacher evaluation plan updates.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Roth.
Yes.
Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
Mr. Breaker.
Yes.
Dr. Kroll.
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
And Mr. Neely.
Yes.
The third action item would be to, a motion to approve the extra duty position additions.
I move that the Board of Education approve the extra duty position additions as presented.
A second.
Any discussion?
I will discuss for all three. Thanks for putting in what we discussed 2 weeks ago, because it helps remind me what we discussed. So this one specifically, I want to make sure I said thanks for that, because I forget a lot of what's happening, and in this, it's in writing, and it helps. So that's my discussion.
Perfect. Any further discussion?
Dr. Kroll.
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
Mr. Roth.
Yes.
Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
Mr. Breaker.
Yes.
And Mr. Neely.
Yes.
Accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I move the Board of Education approve the consent agenda as presented.
I support that.
I'll just make one quick comment. In the consent agenda, there is a item to approve a $30,000 anonymous donation to Jefferson Schools. So I don't know who to thank, but whoever you are, thank you for your contribution to our schools. So that's pretty impressive and awesome. So
It is awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Neely.
Yes.
Mr. Roth.
Yes.
Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
Mr. Breaker.
yes.
Dr. Kroll.
Yes.
And Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
Our next meeting will be on November 28th here at 7 o'clock. And then we have a Grundy teacher meeting at 5:30. So with that, I'll accept a motion to enter into close to discuss negotiations and personnel.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
Dr. Kroll.
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
Mr. Neely.
Yes.
Mr. Roth.
Yes.
And Mr. Breaker.
Yes. That will take 5 minutes to tear down. So thank you, everyone.